Okay, I think you're set, Tim.
Yep, you're
All
ready.
right. All right. Quorum being present, this meeting of the Annapolis Historic Preservation Commission shall come to order. The commission operates pursuant to the land use article of the annotated code of the state of Maryland. Local authority for the commission is derived from municipal code of the city of Annapolis, chapter 21, section 56. The purpose of the HPC is to preserve sites, structures, districts of historical, cultural, and archaeological and architectural significance. Requirements for serving on the commission are detailed in chapter 21, section 8.06. The HPC operates pursuant to the state of Maryland Open Meetings Act, and therefore no pending application shall be discussed between or amongst commissioners outside the public hearing to determine the disposition of any application. So next item on the agenda is roll call. Bill Williams, lifelong resident and practicing architect in Annapolis, here. Kim Finch cannot be here tonight. Bobby Collins.
Here.
Will Scott.
Here.
I am Tim Leahy here. Our staff, Roberta Lanor, Chief of Historic Preservation.
Here.
I don't think John Towers here yet. If he might post in a bit. Earlier, I did see Joelle Braithwaite, our liaison with the Office of Law. And our recorder is Ms. Tammy Hook, who,
Here.
yay, the hardest working person. Okay, we next on the agenda is administrative business. We have no administrative business tonight. So next on the agenda we'll go right to pre-applications. First is 99 Compromise Street. So Hillary, if you could activate the, I think Leo and Leah's going to do the preservation, and Jim. So first, will you acknowledge that the fact that this is a pre-application, and any testimony that you make this evening or any comments are a accommodation to the applicant? We'll provide our thoughts on your application, but in no way does it mean that you will have approval of your application. So can you acknowledge?
So acknowledged.
All right.
So acknowledged.
All right, thank you. All right.
Leo.
Just tell us what you'd like to know, and then we'll get comments among the commissioners, and then I'll summarize.
Okay. I think, Leo, I think I'll start, and I'll just give everyone just a brief background and update on where we are with the rec center. By way of introduction, I think I know most of the folks on the call, but I'm Jim O'Hare, a local developer. I live on Lafayette Avenue. I've done a couple of historic rehab projects in Annapolis. The first was the Bakery Lofts on 43 Lafayette Avenue. And then the second, of course, is the rec center located at what is now known as 99 Compromise. In 2016 and 17, Leo and I came to the HBC, got approval, and also through the Planning Commission got approval for a total of 9 units at the rec center. We have completed 7 of those units and sold them. We've completed all of the work on the rec center proper, so the historic building, and we are looking to build an additional unit. Originally, our plan was for 2 more units, but we found a contract buyer who wants 1 larger unit. And so our plan is to build one house essentially, or one condominium on the garage at the new garage that we built that services the rec center. And we've gone through, we've had several meetings with Jackie and Sally, and I'll let Leo give more detail on this, but basically they've said we can move forward. The approval process will include an amendment to our site design approval, an amendment to our special exception, and then of course HBC design approval. So that's why we are here. And before I turn it over to Leo, I will tell you that I'm happy to be here. I really love doing projects in downtown Annapolis and working with you all. So very much look forward to it.
Thanks. Okay, Leo.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. How's that? Can everyone see what I've got on? Did that come up?
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, you're ready. It's good.
Good. So first off, thanks for having us here tonight. We appreciate any insights you can provide as we move through the process of putting the project together. As Jim explained, we did the work for the rec center. We worked with planning and zoning and with HPC staff to come up with a way to reutilize the building so that it maintained activity on St. Mary's and on Compromise. And so we're excited about what we've done there. It seems to be well received. We think that the project's been really successful. And this is a continuation of that work so that we can complete it. So I'm going to run you through some imagery we put together so that we can get to the discussion part. And then I can go back through the slides to whichever one we want to talk about. So this is an aerial photograph of the rec center in the center, of course, and you can see the townhouse development across the street. You can see where the park and the pump station will eventually go, and then also just the surrounding area that shows kind of general context. The hotel is off to the left, and then again, you can just kind of get a general sense of where the building sits. This is another view. Here you can see kind of over the building out to the harbor, and what you see here is the backside, if you will, of the rec center. And the area where the cursor is now is where the garage that we built to accommodate the folks in the rec center is located. And you may recall that this was at one point just an open kind of chain link fence lot that was in disrepair. So the garage kind of provided a nice piece to the puzzle here for how that building gets used. Of course, this is our new porch on the rec center. We think this tied into the architecture well. Dressed up the building. We kept all the doors, we kept the light fixtures, and just tried to work with the architecture provided from the existing building, which dated back to about the 40s.
42.
Cool.
Actually, I'll just interject. The important thing about this building is it actually defines the end of the period of significance for the whole city, the historic district. This building is significant because it was the end of the period of significance from the National Historic District. So we think of it, and we talked about that years ago. So just thought I'd add to that.
Well, we're glad to see that, we're happy to be a part of revitalizing it and making it something that's useful again. So.
Leo, can I just interject one thing really quickly because it's relevant to this picture? I think the windows really look great. And Roberta will appreciate this. I got a huge compliment via complaint lodged by a city resident to Roberta. They said they've torn out all the windows and they replaced them with new ones. And all of those windows, save maybe 8, are all restored. And so again, yes, we had, and By the way, in the aerial photo, I thought it was funny, the guy who did the restoration work, his van was parked. Yeah, his van is parked in the parking lot. So he was there for a long time. Sorry,
Good
Leo,
work.
go ahead. I couldn't help it.
What's that, Roberta?
I said, good work, Jim.
Great. Just a little further back from the street view along Compromise to give you a little more of the context around the building. Here's a kind of an elevational shot that shows the
Compromise
longer
Street.
elevation. And then one of the things that we talked about in our initial meetings with planning and zoning staff and Roberta, of course, was trying to understand what impact any changes may have on these view corridors. And so I thought it was important to show where we are now. So this is from down the road a little bit. And I think this is kind of gives you an overall sense of what's happening. Close-up shot of from the sidewalk directly in front of the building, and you can see the balconies we've added to the back. Then another view from the opposite direction. So you get a sense of what's happening on the street there. You can see there's a garage over here. The grade changes quite a bit as we come from the top down, and the road bends just a little bit. From this vantage point, it's really hard to see what's happening, but we wanted to make sure we were addressing those things because they came up during our initial discussions. So here's the garage we built, and a couple important things about this. One of the things that we did when we went to look at how we were going to do this project was we wanted to, at the request of, at that point, Chief of Historic Preservation had said that it was important that the new structure follow the guidelines established in B2 about new buildings adjacent to existing historic structures, where you really shouldn't make an attempt to repeat forms of that are historically significant with new work. You're only supposed to try and make it fit into the streetscape. And the idea is that you should be able to tell projects that are not of that same era. So the additions we did here, which include the garage and the entry piece off to the side, are of a different character and follow a pattern we see at the Green Street School for the additions they did, where the initial architecture is preserved and enhanced by the work that's done there, and then the buildings that are adjacent to it or the additions to it are of a different character that's easily discernible. So there's the entry point in the back. And again, it takes on a little bit of a different form. And this is what it looks like from the inside. I think many of you have been in there, but this is what the inside feels like. And the idea was to provide views of the surrounding area from the interior of the building. So the project we have in place right now, of course, here's the site plan that shows the rec center with the additions for the outdoor spaces we provided, the connector piece for the entry, and then the garage piece over here. The shaded blue area is the proposed footprint of what will go over top of the existing garage. This is the first level. And what you have is a connector that comes from the lobby space for the rec center proper, comes through a walkway here and then comes into what I'll call Unit 8. You can see in red, these are the required setbacks for the building itself. And so the garage complied with those. And then this piece was pulled back in several areas in response to what we felt were areas we wanted to make sure were open and we didn't get too close to the street or to the neighbors with the building, so that everyone had access to light and air and it responded well to the streetscape. On the second floor of the addition, you'll see that we pulled it back even further. This is the blue area here. So down below, you'll see the connector that comes across that's only on the first floor. These are outdoor spaces on the second floor. So you can see each floor has a little bit of an outdoor space, and it's intended to step back from what we're seeing from the street so that the building isn't crowding the street. So here we have the elevations, and of course you'll see what is essentially the rear elevation of the rec center. There's our connector piece. There's the existing garage. And then I just toned in blue what's happening in different layers. So the layer closest to the face of the garage, yet still stepped back about 10 feet, is this first floor element. This piece that's shaded very lightly is the connector that's pushed further back. And then on the upper level, there's a piece that's on that same plane, and then it recedes into other pieces here. Again, the idea is to stay away from what we're seeing as a rec center proper and do it in a manner that kind of provides some breathing room around this and the other buildings in the area. So these are the floor plans. Here's our connector piece again, right? Here's the adjacent house at the residence at 7 St. Mary's. Here we have Newman Street. And then on that main level, you can see the open space around the building. This is intended to be developed as outdoor area for the unit. And then we've done it again on the back here as well. The idea is you would come into the unit over here. The living space is facing what I believe will be a really nice view of the harbor or Eagle Alley, and then a bedroom and bath and all the other amenities associated with a first floor use. Then we go up to the second floor, and this has an office space, a bedroom, and a sitting area. And then there's a deck on the outdoor area here. Again, we think we'll have a nice view and helps to bring this building back in terms of scale. And then finally, the roof form. So you can see that the roof form at the upper level is substantially smaller than what the outline of the existing structure is. Elevations, I have these in here. There will be 3-dimensional images that follow this, but I wanted to make sure we included them because sometimes we talk about fenestration in more detail. What we've done here is tried to follow the patterns we've established in the garage on the lower level. So you'll see these elements repeat up here as they recede back. So this is in the first plane, this is pushed back, and then we've got this other one. And we've got these pieces that recede again. So we've got windows on this side, and then all the way back here are some more windows up high. And then there's the connector that connects to the lobby space. We've included a planter wall here rather than a railing. The idea here is that this would kind of provide a little privacy for this unit, but it's also a planter edge. So we intend to fill this with landscape elements. This is what I'll call the back of our building here. This is the connector piece. In trying to be sensitive to reducing our impact on the property at 7 St. Mary's, we reduced openings here so that their privacy is maintained. And you can see very lightly the outline of their building over here, and then it stops over here. So our main structure is kind of shoved off or pushed off to the side so that we can maintain, access to sky plane. We also kept the windows on this back piece here to a relatively low percentage of the wall, again in a nod to try and make sure that we're preserving their privacy. As we come around to the other two sides, this is the one that faces the adjacent property along Newman Street. And so the grade comes up quite a bit. This is where you saw that garage in the first photograph. So these windows and all of this garage element is in place now. You can see we pushed back this plane so that we can provide some distance from the neighbor, which is about over here. Again, we put the windows on this side in patterns that we think will avoid having a problem with our neighbor, reducing, maintaining their privacy, I guess is the best way to say it. And here's that setback that I talked about from Newman Street. And then finally, this is the piece that faces over to the existing rec center building. So this is a good distance away. There's our connector. There's the wall of the building for the proposed addition. And then on the upper floor, we have a small balcony space up there as well. So again, we go back to the elevations here. This gives you a good sense of how it's all set up to work. You can see these patterns start to fill in and take on the character of the work we did during phase 1. So this was all set up in a way so that we could continue it as we work through the rest of the project. Again, you can see this stuff is pushed back quite a distance, and the idea is to make sure that this is separate visually from what we have as a historic structure. Here you can see the beginnings of the neighbor's garage. Sections really are just illustrative at this point, and the idea is to show, here's our existing garage, here's our balcony space, here's the unit itself, and then here's the setback that occurs again on the upper level. And this is again a cut from the other direction, so you can see the cars here. You can see how the setbacks work, and again, it repeats on the back side of the building. So if we were to cut a section through this building with Newman over here, you can see again the setbacks start to make more sense because it's a little easier to see. And you can see lightly shaded here is the outline of the adjacent residence at 7 St. Mary's. And then of course in the distance you can see the existing rec center building. And this is the piece where the lobby is. So I think these start to give you a sense of what we're doing here. This is a perspective view that just roughly blocks out how the building as it sits today, where the garage is, and then how these upper pieces are intended to cascade back, if you will, to provide some to keep from getting a long face on Newman Street and to provide some setback from what I think you'll see from the street as you walk down Compromise or even Newman. Little higher view to give you a sense of how those spaces work outside. Again, they're generous. I think there's a lot of light that comes into it, and you can see the neighbor beyond. And then the bottom ones, you have this in your packets, but these are just, we pulled apart the model a little bit to show what's happening on the first level, what's happening on the second level, and then how it looks with the roof plane. So again, looking back at these view corridors, this is what we see today. And you can see we pulled those pieces back to try and make sure that we're not blocking any of the more interesting elements in the distance, for instance, the spire at St. Mary's. Another angle here, again, you can see the garage and how that works, and then how the piece is intended to work. And this is the planter wall I was speaking about. We pushed all of this, as we talked about before. Close-up shot so you can get a better sense of what it would feel like if you were a pedestrian. Again, as you start to get closer to the building, the relative scale of the thing changes a bit because the existing garage is so close to the street. These other pieces cascading back seem to take on a less prominent role in the architecture. And again, you can still see the garage for the neighbor in the distance. And then of course, the streetscape is kept open and clear. From the park, you can see the garage and of course the buildings in the vicinity. And then this is the piece that would go closer to us now. And then finally, we're getting to the other end here. We're looking down Newman, and you can see the garage, and then you can see how this thing is. We tried to make sure that it was set back from this plane quite a bit so that, even though you can see it, it's pushed back a good distance. And then this one is a little bit odd, only because it's at an angle where you really got to kind of focus way back in there. It's nice and crisp, but this is what it would look like if you were to look up that way from, essentially this is from the middle of the street on St. Mary's. So what we've tried to do is range this thing in a way that it doesn't provide, an element that goes into the streetscape that's, draws attention to itself. It's pulled back. We tried to keep it simple in terms of form. There's not a lot of detail to it. It matches what we've established in the garage and the entry piece, when we started. And so the idea here is to come up with a scheme that, provides what I'm going to say is a minimalist approach to the detailing and to reduce, the impact it will have, and to keep focus on the more important buildings here, which is the rec center proper and some of the other buildings in the area. So it's done in a way not to crowd the streetscape. It's done in a way that provides a pattern that's similar to what's below it and clearly discernible from the more important architecturally significant historic structures in the area, but still provides for the space that we'd like to have. I think of this building in many ways like the Bates-Madison project done on Spa Creek that's up against the water. It's in a historic district, but it's not a historic structure. And so we're not trying to make it that. We're trying to make it something different that seems to fit in, but, is clearly different from how the other ones are detailed and put together. So that's where we are. We do have a process outlined, as Jim explained, for how this happens in terms of the approvals for site design, special exception, building and grading permits. There's no grading, just building. But, all of that stuff is clearly outlined. There's a path forward. I don't believe we need variances for any of this. We think we've stayed within the envelopes and the heights and areas that are required for development like this. And, we work with planning and zoning to make sure we stayed within those parameters. So I think those are pretty clear. So now we're really just focused on, the elements of the architecture that we want to discuss with you tonight. So I think that's where I'm going to stop and let you guys talk a little bit.
Okay. Thanks, Leo. The way we usually work here is I usually first ask Roberta to kind of weigh in, and then I'll ask each of the commissioners to give us their thoughts, and then I'll summarize. So Roberta, what are your thoughts?
I have a basic question first. On the drawing that I first received, it showed the height of the top of the building at 41 feet. And I believe your newest drawing shows 32 feet. Is 32 feet the height?
It is, Roberta. What we did was when we were first putting this together, we just kind of did block diagrams and did the floor to floor heights at certain levels that seemed to make sense to us. And that was kind of our first roll through on this thing. And then after going through and looking at it again, there is a height limit that's in place over here at 32 feet. So we're at 3110 with where we are right now.
Okay, and you are lining up with the, the peak of the dormers?
Yeah, that's right. So we've got these gable forms on the end of the building that are just in front of the main hip form. And then we use that line to establish the top of the dormer elements on the upper level. And we're about aligned with those pieces.
Okay. And on your roof, you are showing only an elevator override. And the mechanicals are off to the left there?
Yeah, we've placed them over here just so that we could easily service them because they're on the lower roof, so they're easy to get to. This override is fairly modest. I'm not even sure I need this, Roberta, with the unit we've picked. These residential units don't typically have an override. If there is one, it would be, relatively modest, maybe a foot.
Okay. And between the edge of the historic building and Newman, the edge of the historic building and the edge of the garage on the Newman face, so it's extending about 20 feet out?
I'm not sure I'm following the question, Roberta.
Okay, so if you're standing on Compromise, looking at the right edge of the historic rec center, and then you're looking back at the garage with its condo, facing Compromise Street. It's extending out towards Newman about 20 feet from the historic building.
Yeah, let's go back to a site plan so I make sure I have this right. This piece over here versus this.
Right.
Yeah, so this piece here is just a touch forward of the balconies we added there. So if you were to continue this line over, it hits about here in the middle of this. So this is proud of this by, I'm going to say probably about 3 feet, but the distance from here to here is less than 20 feet.
But I mean, you do have deck and plantings and things like that extending further out.
Yes, all the way out to the edge. So this is probably closer to the parking spaces are about 20 feet. That's probably about right.
Okay, and another question on the lattice. In one drawing, it looks open. In almost your final rendering, it looks like it's roofed.
This is the roof lattice?
Yeah, this piece
Further
here
away.
is intended to be like an open trellis assembly up here. It just provides shade.
Okay. does it have a roof?
It does not
As
have a
in-
roof.
Okay,
It's a pergola.
Pergola, that's right.
okay. Well, we have what could be described as a pergola at 110 Compromise, but it also has a roof.
Yeah, in this case, we're not going to be doing that.
Okay, so you see in your final rendering how it looks solid.
Let's take a peek here. Yeah, I think it's really just because of the angle, with the boards going across here, but I can tell you it's not intended to be solid there, Roberta.
Okay. So I will run through some comments and some guidelines. All right, Tim?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
I've got a list too. We'll see if and then we'll talk to commissioners too, of course.
So I understand completely how you are talking about how this is designed as a continuation of the garage. I'm having a little trouble seeing how that concept actually meets the guidelines. So let me start with a comment by the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission in 2016, when the rec center was first being designed. And at that time, it was Sharon Kennedy, I believe, and she said, the applicant should look at the accumulated amount of change to ensure that the character defining features on all of the streetscapes are maintained. So it's the accumulated change here is the question, adding condominiums to the garage. Now the garage was designed to have a green roof. It never got a green roof, correct?
Well, it hadn't been installed only because we were still considering whether or not this was viable. So the intent for us is to go back in and apply the green roof elements to the upper portion. So if we go back to the roof plans here, just click through, you can see that that area is all intended to be green roof.
Yeah, you've now identified 6 green roofs that I could count on the whole project.
Right. So the intent is to stay close on the area and just have it in different places based on the proposed design.
So the issue, back in 2016 was, should there be anything more at all on this property? But let me move on to some guidelines. So what we have here is a historic property on a historic site. So the garage and the condominium aren't a separate property. They're part of the same historic property associated with the rec center. So when you talk about the purpose of the ordinance, so it's to protect the character of the streetscape and the buildings. 1, by encouraging new design which is compatible with the historic setting, and 2, by promoting alterations that are sensitive to both the historic buildings and the streetscape. So the question is, how is this visually, you don't have to answer right now, but how is this visually compatible to the actual historic setting? And how is it sensitive to the other historic buildings in the streetscape? As far as views from the water, does it respect traditional views and visual focal points? It is cutting off views from the house up the street and the house, if not 2 houses, behind it. In the guidelines to preserve and enhance individual streetscapes, they talk about rhythm. And the rhythm, they talk about And you want to discourage any kind of landscape element or obliteration of the streetscape wall that disrupts the existing order and the pattern of the rhythm on the street. So the rhythm is changing here because the design changes to one that is more contemporary. Under B1, visual relationships between the old and the new. A new building or addition should visually relate to a contributing historic buildings in its immediate neighborhood. So this relates to the garage, as you have well described, but how does it relate to the rec center, and how does it relate to the other historic buildings up the street and also behind it, which are all part of the streetscape? This is an addition to the garage, so I looked at additions, and the additions should be designed to be subordinate to the historic main building. Is it subordinate if it is as tall as the dormers? Under B8, roof shapes. Roof shapes should visually relate to the roof forms and slopes on the historic buildings. So this is, as you say, minimalist and has a flat roof, and which does not relate to either the rec center or the buildings to the side or to the rear. Secretary of the Interior standards. Number 1, the property should be used for its historic purpose with minimal change to the defining characteristics of the building, its site, and its environment. So I don't see this as creating 2 stories as a minimal change. 1 story might be more minimal, but 2 stories doesn't seem minimal to me. In guideline 9 about additions, it should be compatible in mass, size, scale, and features. And it's even looking at this elevation, it doesn't seem compatible. It seems large, to use kind of a plain word, but you could, I would say, incompatible with the massing and scale of the main building. Now that's not to say we're looking for a neo-colonial revival building on top of the garage. It just seems pretty overwhelming the way it is designed right now. Let's see if I had another one. So basically, I understand what you are saying as far as how it is relating to the garage itself, how it is stepping back. I just don't see it relating to the guidelines that talk about how it has to blend with its streetscape and the historic features of the streetscape. The only thing I'm seeing is the brick.
Right. Okay. I mean, I find that Newman is a tricky street because really it's almost a service street, if you will, as it comes down from the top. And so if you make that turn to come down this street, it's really quite tight. And on one side, it's a row of trees that form the backyard of most of the houses there. And the immediately adjacent neighbor is essentially, just a flat plane right up at the street. So this was intended to be compatible with the streetscape as it is already defined by, this type of structure.
Well,
So,
the flat plane is fine for matching the first floor of the garage, but all you have to do is step back 10 feet and then you're looking at the design of a residential building.
Right. Okay.
And the
Okay.
little historic, what they called, forgive my language, but that's on the Sanborn map, called the Old Negro School. So
Right.
there was a original school behind that garage. Is that correct, Tim?
Yeah.
Uh,
This
of
whole
a school.
this whole side of the street was the original Negro school for Annapolis, sponsored by St. Mary's. Unfortunately, all that's been lost, and be sometimes great to recognize it, but the archaeology is all buried there now. So, and of course, we have on the other side, we have the playground and the park coming up. So,
Tim, I would say we invested quite a bit in the archaeological study on the garage site.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we didn't, unfortunately, we didn't find a lot in terms of kind of artifacts that would support. I was really hopeful that we'd find some things related to the school, and we didn't. But what we did find was that we found evidence of a fire that evidently burned those buildings down.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the artifacts that we found were actually on the St. Mary's corner, which used to be 99 Compromise and 97 Compromise, and those were oyster processing plants.
Yeah.
And so we found, like, for instance, brass pulleys and that sort of thing that were used, but unfortunately not much from the school.
Yeah.
But as I did at 43 Lafayette, I would absolutely be in favor of some element that noted the former use of that corner of the property, just for, you know, and I think we could put some research into it, and maybe even just put a plaque on the side of the garage, which would be terrific.
Yeah. All right. All right.
So if I
So,
could just if I
Commissioners-
could just summarize for a second, I'm
Sure.
not saying that staff is not saying that it's not feasible. I'm just saying some modifications are recommended to make it more closely meet the guidelines.
Okay. Great. All right. I'll open up to commissioners.
Tim?
Will, you're the first on my little thing here, so you go, Will.
Well, first I'd like to just ask Roberta 2 questions for clarification. Roberta, you referenced a discussion at the commission in 2016. Were the points that you mentioned from that discussion in any way recorded as conditions or something else that is binding on our actions today?
The discussion took place, as I understand from the minutes, to help guide the design of the rec center.
Okay, so they're not, none of that is binding on what we're discussing today. It was the context of the discussion 4 years ago about the rec center building itself.
And its site.
Okay, all right. That,
So we have a site that has now been allowed to have a garage, and that garage is now changing.
okay, gotcha.
So
No, that's what I was having trouble understanding exactly what you were trying to convey to us who weren't part of that discussion, and now I do understand that. Thank you. And the other thing I wanted to ask for clarification is, when you talk about the streetscape and whether this proposal conforms to the existing streetscape, are you including the Fleet Reserve Club building as part of your concept of the streetscape surrounding this site?
no, the streetscape in this case is considered the immediate block, and that is going up Newman and St. Mary's.
Okay, thank you. Tim, are you asking me to pose questions to the applicant or make a statement about my assessment of feasibility?
Well, as we usually do in these pre-applications, it's just, do you think it's feasible? And if, are there things that you don't find feasible regarding the guidelines? Is it in alignment? So this is just a process of feeding back to the things they might change to make it more feasible. So.
Okay, then my statement is, of course, I defer to the guidelines and the commission and the staff's opinion of how the guidelines must be applied. But I would see the proposal that I've looked at and that I've heard under discussion as an asset to the community. And I see it as entirely feasible as it's presented.
Okay. All right. Bill, you're next on my little list here. What comments do you have?
No real major comments right now, though the addition, and I'm looking at the rendering that's up right now specifically, is extremely plain. And I don't say that in necessarily negative, but it's undetailed to a degree that you have a brown box. It's a tiered brown box, it's a step brown box, but still a brown box. You look at the old rec building and you have the details called out, the paint pieces, the fenestration, it's all very visible. Now, if we were to detail that box in such a way that it took on a character that both accentuated the historic while not overpowering it, I think it may help the overall appearance. As far as the project itself is concerned, I can't say I have a real issue with it on the historic nature. If I step back from the street, it appears feasible. Its height, as Roberta said, is a concern. But as far as the perspective height, a elevation in drawings always distort. It does not express what you really see. And I'm trying to picture this brown box in real life. I don't think it's going to be as dominating as it definitely suggests in the drawings that Leo provided. I think it's feasible. I think in the end it can probably be in some fashion approved, but it needs more work.
Yeah. So I'll guide you a little bit. You're saying from a visual relationship, this is guideline B1, that the building should, B1 relates to the, visually relate to the
have more
buildings
relationship
in
to
the
the building. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the scale, B6 is the size of it. It has to do with the subordination of an addition. So I think what I'm just layering on what you said, the guidelines I think you're referring to are the details of the brown box are not visually relating to the rec center, which is
As
historic.
the building looks now, I don't believe there's a fair visual relationship between the two. They're two separate, complete entities.
You know, I just want to talk about that for just a minute because, you know, it's a conundrum. What we're looking at here is, you know, essentially an infill project between, you know, what I think is, you know, significant structure that we've, you know, rehabilitated. But then we have this space between that and, you know, the adjacent houses on Newman, and, you know, it starts to change character as you go up the hill. But, you know, if you think about context for this thing, you know, you could try and pick up, and we talked about this at the initial meeting when, you know, Roberta and P&Z were there. And, one approach is to try and pick up elements from the historic structure. And, I think in certain instances, I would say that's probably an appropriate response. In this case, I think the idea of trying to take some elements from the significant structure and put them into one that I'm trying to make as a background structure is in my view, it starts to detract from the character of the rec center. If I go back to guideline B2, it basically says if you're going to do these types of structures, following the fenestration patterns of what's established, that's probably a good idea. But it says, you're not supposed to try and replicate forms or elements of historic structures with new buildings. You're supposed to try and make an attempt to make it immediately discernible as not of that thing. And so, even if you were to go to like pitched roof forms, could we do that? Yeah, we could do that. But, if you look back to the, what I see all over this area, the newer buildings are not that. The newer buildings are a different thing. Click back all the way to the early, photographs of the neighborhood. You start to look at what is happening from an overall view. I mean, my goodness, the yacht club, of course, is a historic structure that's, it's significant, but you've got flat roofs over here. You've got flat roofs over on these buildings. If I had shown the school, that's got flat roofs on it. The Fleet Reserve is, again, part of the streetscape, although you could argue that it's too far away, but the context is a hard thing to pick up in this particular location. And trying to, start to mirror something that doesn't exist really, in a strong way was problematic for me as a designer. I was thinking, as I walk down that street, I've got what I've got there today. And I think the goal was to pull the pieces back so that there wasn't an impact. And you could argue that you could do it in a more successful way, but I think I would argue that it was a, well-considered, approach to this thing. I looked at other options for the roof forms and felt that, those were less appropriate than what we've come up with. So that's just I'm just trying to give you background to how I got to where I am with this thing.
Leo, I'm not specifically saying put on a gabled roof or hipped roof or anything. What I'm saying is the building as it currently sits, it's just by what I'm seeing, it looks like a big brown box.
No, I understand that.
It doesn't have any detail of its own, even to separate it as an individual right now in its own form, or at least its representation at this point.
Right.
It is a dominating block.
I mean, I get that. I think we could look at that as we, before we come back in. Is there another way to execute this thing that might be, a little less plain? I think that's probably not a bad comment.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where we're going. If you look, there's no cornice, there's no brickwork. You've got a pretty elaborate pergola.
Hey, Leo, can you go back to the close-up of the garage, kind of showing the entranceway? And I appreciate all those comments, and it's really important to me because I see modern buildings that are built, and my biggest complaint with masonry buildings, modern masonry buildings, is they're so flat. And so as I worked with, we had a great mason, Wells Masonry, and they were very excited about the project because they don't get to do this very often anymore. But Leo, can you go to the photo that shows like the main entrance? So yeah, so you can see the corbelling that we did at the top, and we spent a lot of time with the mason on what that would be and how it would look and how it would relate to the windows. And we will do the same thing up above. I think that's really hard to show in a rendering. And it may not, that fine detail shows up in a photo, but not so much in the rendering, but it will appear, and we will go to great lengths to make sure that happens.
Well, at this point in the process, it will be important for you to show that in your final. That's the kind of thing that will make your presentation more persuasive. You can show us that detail in the final presentation. So this is a pre-app, remember. So you don't have to defend everything. But that's the kind of thing we're giving you feedback. If that's the kind of detail you're going to show, and the brick color, the brick samples are all going to be important in the final application.
So
Understood.
this is Roberta, and I want to go back to B2, and B2 doesn't say replicate, it says imitate.
No.
So by using features from the historic building, you are not necessarily replicating, but you are helping it to blend onto the historic property. Basically, what you are saying is that you want it to have the commercial appearance of what is on the water side of Compromise Street. And that's not what I see on this residential block.
Right.
Right. Well, so I think, these are all helpful tips for me as I look at this thing. And I think your point's well taken, that a little more articulation in how we're handling these masses so that it doesn't appear so plainer and so simple, that's something I think we could accommodate.
Yeah. Even some variation in color, honestly,
Sure.
Just, sorry, I'm chiming in here a little bit, but just the variation in color.
Right.
All right, Bobby hasn't chimed in yet. Bobby?
I've kind of been listening to everything that's been said, and I think pretty much my thoughts mirror other commissioners. I mean, the words that I wrote down on my notepad here are that the building, while attractive, is a jarring departure from the feel that is on the rest of the block. And to use Bill's term, a big brown box, that's kind of the thought that's percolating around in my head as well. I like the idea that I just heard a couple minutes ago of finding some way to add some character to this building, if you will, to kind of, while not imitate the historic property that is adjoining, to give it some sense of the same feel, that it inhabits the same area, so that it's not a complete departure to something that's totally modern and totally different. I mean, the amount of windows, if you just, when I look at a property, I look at to see how many windows there are, how much glass there is. And if you look at the rec center, it's a very classic building with older windows that I can't tell whether they're double hung or not, but it has that calm feel to it. The newer building, to me, does not have that calmness at all. I will admit, I like the design of the building. I think it's very attractive. But I'm struggling with the fact that it sits next to the rec center. It's too jarring a difference for me. I appreciate hearing Leo talk about how he got to where he got, because one of the first things I thought of when I saw the design is, why didn't we have some kind of a pitched roof? Even that simple roof line would help it merge a little bit better with the building next door. And I understand the challenges he had and the thoughts that he had in the design process. But yeah, I mean, B1, the visual relationship between the old and the new, B2, the new building design, and B4, the relationship of the facade parts to the whole. Those are really the things that I think about when I see this design.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I think I don't need to add too much, but I think we've given you some guidelines to look at. I think I concur that it is, from a visual relationship, it looks like, actually, I would believe this was a commercial structure, because the residential structures have, again, not gabled roofs, but have differentiation with cornices and differentiation in color, but it looks like a commercial structure as I look from this exact view. And so that's the visual, that's B1, visual relationships. So adding some details would, I think, break the scale down a little bit. The B2, the new building design, we're not looking to imitate or replicate, but we're just looking to be compatible. So again, I'm starting to summarize for Tammy's benefit here. The B4, I think it doesn't sound like any of the commissioners necessarily felt there needed to be less glass area. There is a considerable amount of window space on this building compared to the really only other building that is important, which is the rec center. I did not hear any necessarily desire to have a brick facade pierced by square windows. Just anyone correct me if I'm wrong, but it's obviously going to be a very dramatic view. But I don't think we were looking to reduce the glass area. If you go back, Leo, to some of the elevations, this is I'm injecting this point of view. It gets a little busy picking up the lattice, the muttons from the garage. Yeah, that's a lot.
Right.
Now that view is going to be seen when I play basketball. So it's not, not extremely important.
Well, I certainly think we can look at those things. I mean, I think, the point's well taken. I think the comments are very helpful.
Yeah, I think picking up the garage lattice work makes it even look more commercial. If you were to say, oh, that's the garage, above is a residence, to make it look more like residential windows as opposed to a commercial building like a bank branch. You know how we love to refer to bank branch design. And actually, there's one more comment I'd like to make, and breaking down the bulk of the height. If that one, you've picked up the line of the gable, the new gable roof on, right, you picked up that line as your height. Just breaking that straight edge there, I don't want to over design, but to me, if you break a straight edge there, you kind of start to break down the overall mass of the building and its subordination. That's B6. I'm struggling with subordination here. It's somewhat distant. It's not necessarily subordinate. So I think by breaking down the mass of that roof line there would improve subordination. That's B6, as I said. And also B8. You're not going to be able to put gable roofs on this building, I know that, or hip roofs or anything like that, to get the design that you want or the program that you want. So that's B8, I think it goes with subordination, breaking down some of the roof shapes a bit with some detail maybe. That's the design decision for you. Okay, so those are my thoughts. Any other comments? All right, then I'll quickly summarize.
Tim, if
Yeah.
I want to add my voice to support the thread of articulation. I can easily see how someone like Leo can do some things to articulate and maybe even break the mass a little bit while keeping the overall character of the vision he has for this structure. But I also want to push back against what a couple of people have said. I think this street is one of the most nondescript streets in the historic district. And I like the fact that I think he's made a distinct statement while still linking it to the rec center structure. And I like that. I'd like to see us be able to have that kind of variety appropriately done within the historic district. But that's just me, and obviously I'm not in the majority.
No, no, I get what you're saying. How many times have I driven down this street? How many accidents have I had on this street? Two. I know it is almost an alley, so I get that. There's the very last slide. So I understand what you're saying, Will, and I think we can incorporate the very last picture. I think is keep going there. This one is the one that actually concerns me the most from a visual impact from an important street. St. Mary's is a new street comparatively, but I think even with articulation of a roof line, a cornice, a possible change just in the design of the windows would make it more compatible with this little house here, which is significant. It is a contributing structure. And I would encourage you, of course, to talk with the neighbors about this just before your presentation to the HPC. And I assume some of the residents of the existing condos are also going to weigh in on this and how it's going to impact them. I assume you're going to reach out to them. But this is the one, if you look at any kind of streetscape, this is the one that would benefit the most from some articulation and scale changes.
Gotcha.
And it's only for those. It's not a primary view of in the city, but this is a contributing building. Both of these are contributing buildings.
Gotcha.
And the one next to it too, on the upper one up the street to the left is also that view, which could change.
Right. Well, these comments, I go through this process all the time. And one of the things I enjoy about it is, I go to these things and I say, oh, I think I got like this solution that's really going to be successful. And, the big swings are not too far off. And then, but, your points are well taken. I wonder what would happen if we looked at, some ways to soften this a bit and to pick up some elements like this here potentially, and pick up some of the starts we did with some of the brickwork and masonry, and maybe look at how the fenestration is set up so that it doesn't read as much of a commercial building. I certainly think a more contemporary approach to it is sensible, but it could be softened and it could be made to relate so we could say, oh, it is part of that because I see that piece repeat over here. Maybe it's not even the same color, but at least it starts to replicate those types of things.
Yeah.
Those are, I think, helpful tips for us as we move forward with the design.
And it is a problematic site. There isn't a heck of a lot of rhythm on this street, but I think we get that.
Yeah, and you know what? In some ways, it's a good thing for me because there's really not a lot to relate to. But I think like you said, your points are well taken, and I think we can work with them.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Leo. You summarized that well from what we said.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the time, guys.
All right, and so Tammy, I think I gave you. I think the majority of the commissioners feel this is a feasible application with some modifications for softening some of the roof line. The massing seems to be okay in terms of its footprint and scale, but in terms of visual relationship to the rec center, that's B1, and some also subordination is guideline B6, and then perhaps that also B4, the facade and the window relationships to the existing building also could be softened or changed. And B8 is the roof shapes. Okay.
Great.
Tammy, was that enough detail for you?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you all very much.
We look forward to a full application.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Have a
Thank
good
you.
day. Bye-bye.
All right. Next on the agenda is a pre-application for 156 South Street, which is just a variety. Actually, I think it's multiple murals. 3, I believe, that we need to discuss in the application for the historic district. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think 6, 7, and 9.
Hillary, this is for Jeff Huntington.
Sorry, I did the wrong one.
Future history now, yeah.
Are we visible?
Not yet, Jeff.
I'm gonna
There
get
you
a
are.
There you go.
glass of water real quick.
Are we unmuted? Can you hear us?
I'm going to grab something
Hear
too.
you.
Yes.
So while Tim's away, shouldn't we clarify that this is only for a single mural? Or are you going to present for others?
I'm really gonna present for just one, but
Right.
then I'm gonna very briefly just show two that are for the future, just to put, because there's really 9 murals in this whole mural tour. Only
Yeah.
3 of them will be in the historic district, but only one of them is ready to move forward at this time.
Okay. Hi, Julia.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Are we ready to go, or
Sure, go ahead. So just to be clear, you're going to present, this is fine, it's a pre-application. So if you intend to do one in the near future and then 2 or 3 in the future, we can comment on all of them tonight.
Okay.
Give you feedback.
All right. So should I go ahead and bring up the imagery now?
Sure.
Okay.
And real quick, did you do the acknowledgement thing with him?
Thank you.
You did, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so Jeff, the important thing that you know, this is a pre-application. And so we're giving you feedback and it's an accommodation before your formal application. So anything that we might comment on tonight should not be construed as approval or denial. So do you understand that? Just
Understood.
understood. Thank you. Thank you, Tammy.
Should I close this? Okay. All right. So I'll just briefly explain this one mural that is proposed to be painted at 156 South Street. This white wall here is a white painted stucco wall on the side of this brick building, is just one component of a mural tour by our nonprofit called Future History Now. And the mural tour is called Kids Making History. It's made up of 9 murals, 4 which already exist. Every mural is done with a group of kids from our program, a different group of kids for every mural. And there's a component to the mural tour will be a virtual docent guide, activated by a QR code at each location. And the virtual museum docent in this case will be the voices of the kids who work on that particular mural at that particular site. And when you hit the QR code, it'll take you to a site with an audio file that allows you to listen to the kids explaining to you the content of that particular mural and the history behind it. And then a brief description of their experience working on it before they direct you to the next location on the virtual map in this mural tour. So it's all within walking distance of each other. The first one is the President's Hill mural behind the Lighthouse Bistro on Madison Place off of West Street. Murals, that's mural 1, mural 3, 1, 3, 5, and 7 already exists. 7 is inside of the Banneker Douglas Museum. 5 is the Star Theater mural at the St. Anne Cemetery. And number 3 is the Pearl Bailey mural at the People's Park. So this would be location number 7 following the Banneker Douglas Museum. And this, I'm sorry, yeah, that's correct. And the second of 3 exterior murals to exist within the historic district borders. So here's the building. We'll move on to, there's another view of the wall in question, a little bit closer up. And this is the proposed image of Thurgood Marshall with the text "Equal Justice Under Law" and 1908 to 1993. And you can see in the inset there's a QR code down in the corner. I don't know if you can see that. The
Yeah.
whole set of text measures 3 feet wide. It says Kids Making History Mural Tour, location number 7, Thurgood Marshall, painted by Future History Now and Stanton Center Youth. And Stanton Center Youth is just a placeholder right now. We don't know exactly which kids we're going to work with, but we work with them a lot on a lot of our projects. Below that, it will say mural project made possible by T-Mobile and then 2020. So this mural is being funded by T-Mobile. So we're in have an agreement with them should this go through, that that's where their name would be on the mural. And as you can see, it's very small in the bottom left where we usually find a discrete place to sign our murals, and it usually just says Future History Now and whatever group we're working with. We're going to be adding the QR codes to the other locations as soon as we get all the kids assembled in the sound studios to record all the files for each location. Are there any questions so far?
Actually, just real quick, this building we're pretty familiar with. It's adjacent across the street from the courthouse. And it's, and you can see on the left there, that's the garage entrance to the Bank of America building. The building itself, I don't think is a contributing building. Is that correct, Roberta? I just want to make sure the building, the facade we're looking at.
In 1930, there were 2 dwellings on that site. The dwellings were demolished at some point, and so this building, you are correct, is non-contributing.
That's real.
So it would be lenient standard of review.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we'll move on to the next one.
Yep. So as you mentioned, it's right across the street from the courthouse. And we've always, I just want to back up a little. We started designing this concept of the mural tour to promote tourism and as a way to engage our outreach programs and the communities. We started this in 2015, and it's just been kind of getting it done however we can, whenever we can. So it's a slow process, but I've always coveted this wall because it's
every blank wall you see, right? Like, oh,
well, not necessarily, but this one happens to be just blank, smooth, stucco, not unpainted brick, which I find to be very unappealing for mural surfaces.
Okay.
And at the angle it's placed, when you enter the courthouse and go through security, you then put your belt back on and your shoes and you walk to the left and you go down that long corridor of glass windows.
Yep.
These people are going to have to check you on your way through that corridor, Thurgood Marshall. And I just think it's I want to mention, with all of the murals in this mural tour, they're all site specific. Meaning they're very relevant to the actual site they're on. Some of them to the actual piece of concrete they're on, like the Pearl Bailey mural, for example. Pearl Bailey used to work at the Washington Hotel, which I believe sat on the footprint of the garage that is currently in its place. And she worked there and performed there for a couple years. So we just thought it was very poetic to have her on that location. With Dr. Dan, which we're proposing to be on 79 West Street, the medical building that's painted battleship gray right next to Asbury Church. Dr. Daniel Hale Williams is the first African-American to successfully perform the open heart surgery back in 1895, and is great. He would be on the wall of the medical center staring at the church which was founded by his great-grandfather. And to the right of him is the crosswalk that takes you to West Washington Street, and straight down is the Stanton Colored School, or what used to be the Stanton Colored School, where Dr. Dan went as a child. So we find all of these connections to be really fascinating, and just a great way to tie in all of the history with these locations. And So back to Thurgood Marshall, we really like this idea because what he's contributed through his seat in the Supreme Court and the location to the courthouse. It's a little bit further away if you're walking up toward the circle. And just kind of, I want to also mention the palette and the 3 murals that are in the historic district, exterior murals. We've designed them to be a little more monochrome in palette, for one. They're all of them, not necessarily black and white, but monochrome so they don't really pop out and jump, but rather conform with some harmony to the surrounding environment and the historic character of the environments, with less abstract elements in them. This one, I want to attempt to be as hyper-realistic as you see it here, but most of the bottom portions will create as spot color vectors, but to appear this way from a distance, but up close it will be designed as spot color vectors, meaning almost like a very intricate paint by number with a very limited palette. But this is a way that we design some of the projects so that the kids of any art skill level can participate. Even no art skill level, even adults with no art skill level can participate. And so that way, we can't bring them up on the boom lifts in this country. So we in other countries, kids will actually build the bamboo scaffoldings for us and take their shoes off and climb right up to the top. And we're just like, what?
Tied two ladders together.
But they live in a different, they don't have our litigious culture. So I'm sorry, I'm getting off a little bit, but these are just some ways where the kids can be active participants and take ownership in these along with their communities as well. Here's a view from our car driving around the circle. So this is the view from the circle when you're in the passenger seat. And as you can see, it's just sitting back there and kind of obscured by, cars and the pole, but doesn't jump out too loud. So should I move on to some of the others, or
Yeah.
does
I think we have 2 more in the district, right? Ava Cassidy.
So this one, I'm sorry, this isn't from an old proposal, so I haven't learned to make the images big yet. So this is Ava Cassidy. This is a wall that is a patch of concrete. You can see the stains on the concrete patch between the red brick wall that has the tar lines and the left cinder block wall that has the Marion Warren photographs. This wall is a concrete patch, and then there's some cinder blocks sticking out from behind it. It's located on the side of 45 West Street and between 37 West and 45 West, the parking lot at Stan and Joe's.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's all there written for you. But Ava Cassidy, we thought would be an interesting choice here as a musician, for she has performed at some of the venues on this street. And she was a native, and she died in, I believe, 1998 at the age of 32. But she was something else. She was recorded with Chuck Brown and the Soul Searchers, and she was a really special gem that not a lot of the young people know about, but we thought she would be a great one to put here. And the monochrome has a little tinting to it here to kind of be a little more harmonious with the surrounding red in the bricks and the tar line and the black and white Marion Warren photographs. On the bottom left photo, you see the 2 Marion Warren photographs, and it's not really in this picture, but right behind that bush is a plaque that says Gallery Row. So to me, this little cove looks like an exterior gallery, and it just looked like another canvas in the corner screaming out for something a little prettier than the stains that it has. It currently has some graffiti tags on it. And as you can see in this one, somebody tried to tag it with a power washer.
Also, it becomes the backdrop for concerts or during.
Yeah, so right now
a band sets up generally.
And where the red Jeep is, there's some picnic tables back there, I believe.
Right.
So here would be the one that would come after the South Street wall. This is proposed for the back of one of the buildings on Gorman Street. This is Hoppy Adams. Now this image is not the rendering we want to use exactly. It's just a placeholder I put in there because I have not designed yet exactly how we want it, but I want to, with all of these murals I've worked with in some, I'm sorry, not all of them. In some cases I've worked with Janice Hayes Williams, Carl Snowden, Anna Greenberg, the Maryland Hall of Records, the building owners. They've all had input on the content in some form or another. This one I've spoken with Janice Hayes Williams about, and she recommended that we add Morris Blum in there, which I thought would be a great idea because he owned the radio station, and she also believes the building may still be owned by somebody in the Blum family. I'm not sure about that. We haven't looked into it, but this is the location where we thought it would be just a wonderful thing to see when you're walking back there, coming out of the garage. Just a little bit of the Hoppy Adams history. And I think that's all I have for you here. So these last two, we'll just, we'll bring those up again later when we get a little closer to having permission from the property owners and funding and so forth.
Okay. Well, just off the top, I'll say that one of the goals of the early on in the Historic Preservation Commission was to foster civic beauty in addition to preservation. So we feel that I feel that part of the commission's role is to foster civic beauty, and that this falls within that particular guideline. Actually comes right out of the code. And we also, these are alterations to buildings, again, coming right out of the code. And so thank you for remembering to join us through this approval process. And also we provide an opportunity to get some public input when you come to a final presentation. There'll be an opportunity for the public to support these projects. And I think that's really important from the HPC role, is public testimony. So with that, I'll turn it over to Roberta. Thoughts?
I just wanted to mention first that this is a slightly different circumstance in that sometimes pre-applications come several months before the final application. And it just so happens that today, September 24th, was the due date for the final application. So for both this presentation and the next one, we also have two formal applications for the November public hearing. And I'll just mention that the guidelines for this project are really the same as those that the commission reviewed for the mural application at the restaurant level on West Street. And those would be B1, visual relationship between old and new, and just a couple on the Secretary of the Interior standards, number 1, number 2, number 5, and number 9. And in all cases that the staff feels that this is a feasible project. And John Tower, you're in the audience now. Do you want to weigh in at all?
An important step in bringing visual history to the otherwise plain side of the building. And I approve.
Okay. All right, looking on my list here, Will, you're at the top of my little Brady Bunch right now. So Will, do you have any comments, further comments? You're muted.
I think in the historic district, perhaps more than in the rest of the city, it's important to call attention to important figures in our local history. So I think these are great ideas. And of course, Jeff does and Julia do great work wherever they put these kids.
Absolutely.
Paint and brushes.
Yeah. Bobby, you're next on my Brady Bunch.
I actually have a couple of questions. Are the murals intended to be permanent? And if so, how will they be maintained? In other words, when weather and other things, happen.
In general, I consider murals to be impermanent by nature as anything else paint-wise, meaning that it can always be reversed if necessary, but the paints that we use are the highest quality exterior latex and artist grade spray paints that have the shelf life for the light fastness of these are as good as it gets with the exterior paints, just short of using mineral-based Kime paints, which have like 100+ year proven shelf life so far. We actually don't know because it was developed about 100 years ago and they're still going strong. They're just very, very costly. Permanent as the owner and the city wants it to be. Future history now, and also Jaru LLC, our for-profit mural company, we always are willing to touch up, let's say if anything was vandalized, tagged, which we have not experienced that before. And with any of our murals throughout the world, with the exception of one mural in DC that has a small tag somewhere along the 50-foot length of it that has just become a part of the piece in one of the patterns. I kind of like it.
Okay.
So touch-ups, anything from nature, any fading that should occur that is shows any significant difference, we are always happy to come and touch those up. The only thing that we ask for, something that we would be hired for is if there were, some damage to the wall that were of some nature, caused by nature or a car or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think they're lovely. I'm hoping that they hold up well. So. Nothing really in addition from me in comments. I think they're a unique way to highlight the history of our area. And I've always enjoyed Ava Cassidy's music. I didn't know she was a local, so.
I think more like Edgewater, but she played locally and hung out locally. She may have lived locally. I don't know that much about her, but I know her, one of her ex-boyfriends who still plays locally.
Yeah. She was pretty much really discovered posthumously, is my understanding.
I think so, beyond just the musicians that gigged with her and some of like Chuck Brown's following.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
She was born in Oxon Hill and died in Bowie.
Oh, wow. PG County. Who knew?
I think her parents still live in in Edgewater, and if we do move forward with that, we're going to actually get them involved. So
Right.
we did make T-shirts of her. She was a great visual artist too. So Cynthia Cruson had brought one of her drawings to my studio, and we created a screen print out of it to you know, when we first brought up this idea that we were doing Ava Cassidy a few years ago, and she tried to generate some fuss about it.
Awesome.
Well,
All
thank
right.
you.
Hey, Bill Williams, do you have thoughts, additional thoughts?
I like them. I look forward to them showing up. That's all I have to say.
Okay, well, yeah, I think as I'll summarize that these projects, actually, let me go step back one more. The actual applicant, interestingly enough, and Roberta, this is a question for you, does the building owner have to be the applicant and eventually when we get to these? So maybe you can let us know, how does that actually work?
Well, in the application, we do have a letter from the owner
Okay,
giving his approval.
okay, so Jeff, you've already been through that with these building owners.
With this particular building owner, yes.
Okay,
The others I'm still working on having the conversation with.
Brian's waving his hand.
I just wanted to show this. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, that's Ava.
This is a biography of her. Like, great. She was an incredible artist. She was a friend of mine. She was going to play at 49, but got sick. But many of her co-musicians still play at my place. Her father will occasionally play at my place. He's an amazing artist also. So I look forward to that. And man, Jeff, you said you didn't want to put that that Happy Adams one there, but I can't wait to have that one somewhere in Annapolis. That is incredible photo.
Yeah, I would love to put it there, but I mean, I understand there's going to be garage construction going on there too. So we'll just see, you know, if we can get permission and then just kind of follow along and see what happens with construction and maybe wait that one out.
Mm-hmm.
The Eva one is also on the wall. It's in the Stan and Joe's parking lot. That wall is mine, or partially mine. It's a condominium where 49 West and 45 West, which I own, are. But I look forward to that one.
Awesome. All right. Then summarizing then the application for the specifically 156 South Street, the mural is feasible. All of the commissioners have weighed in. It's consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards, particularly number 9, which I always point to as protection of historic assets, and D3, which is preservation of features. We're not modifying any features on the building. So we would look forward to a full application. And then the other two, when they come along, will follow this same path.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Next on the agenda is 14 State Circle, another mural. It's mural night. So Dylan, are you going to present, or do you let's see, is Hillary still here?
I can actually, I have it up so I can share my
Okay,
screen.
great. Thank you.
Firstly, I just want to give a huge shout out to both Roberta and John Tower. They have been super helpful in this process. And for the record, I'm Dylan Baylor. I am here on behalf of Senator Elfreth, who helped get this money in the state budget to build this mural or photograph, as you want to describe it. So I'm going to share my screen now. Can you guys see it okay?
Yep.
All right. So starting off, this is a rendering of what the mural will look like, it's not so much a mural, it's going to be a printed enlarged photo. With 2020 being the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment, we wanted to try and find a way to highlight not only that important event, but also highlight some of the local leaders that were a part of that movement. So with that in mind, we worked with the local or the Maryland State Archives to figure out which photo would work best. And they found this photo in their catalog. And it is actually a group of women who refer to themselves as the Army of the Severn. And the photo itself is from 1914. And the photo is on the State House steps. And it's just amazing to see that we still have this preserved history of local women right here from the Annapolis area that were amazing women a part of this process. So the photo itself is going to be 11.5 feet wide and 3.5 feet tall. It's going to bump out from the wall by about 6 inches if everything goes according to the plan. This photo is from the view of the Maryland Inn, I believe it's called, right next door.
State House Inn.
The State House Inn, I apologize. The State House Inn with the new fence as they go through that process. And both the owners of, both Andrew Fox, the owner of the State House Inn, and Jerry, the owner of the building at 14 State Circle, have been amazing in this process. And to answer the question before it comes up, the only thing that wasn't included in the application was the authorization from the owner. And that's only because he had cataract surgery today, so he was actually physically unable to sign the form. But as he recovers, we will get that signed and sent in as soon as he's able to actually sign it. And then as I scroll down, just to give you a little bit more of a feel of what the photo will look like. As you can see, this is a picture from a little bit further up State Circle. That's 14 State Circle down here. The enlarged photo will be right here. And then this is a view from the front of the State Circle building, just so you guys, just so you can recall what the front of the building looks like. And then the building itself actually extends down to Main Street, but we're not going to be touching this side of it. So just so you can get a feel again of where it's going to be at. With that, I'm available to answer any questions. We're going to take care during the process to not damage any of the underlying brick on the stucco wall. And then after talking with John, the most likely material that we will use is going to be premium #1 lumber for the frame itself and medium density overlay for the photo. And then with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, but we just think it's a super exciting opportunity to highlight these amazing women just a few steps from where they actually stood over 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Just following our method here. Roberta, would you like to comment for us, please? Or John, either of you.
Well, I can, one thing that was left out, it's a minor detail really, but this part of the building didn't exist until after 1930. It doesn't show on the Sanborn maps. So is it a constricted structure? Well, it's certainly within an important viewscape. Historically, well, not so much. And you know, I certainly hope that Leo doesn't use it for ideas for his flat facade building.
Okay.
And really, that's it. I think it's
not contributing.
I think it's well placed. It'll be an interesting addition to the side of what is a blank building. I want to emphasize that the fence has neither been applied for nor built. That is not something that we have approved there.
Right, that's not, we would not actually be able, that lattice work top is actually specifically not compliant.
I thought everyone, as soon as I saw it, I was like, what is that? I went by and said, oh, thank God it's not built. Anyway, you know, I think people will find it very interesting. I hope they don't trip as they're walking down the hill staring at it.
Roberta, anything to add?
You're muted.
We'll make sure in the application in November, the public hearing in November, that, you know, we refer to it as a panoramic photograph,
Okay.
since it's not really a mural. the other thing I saw in the application that came in today, no, not today. Yes, the email application that I saw talks about a script of interpretation. So Dylan, what is that and where is it going? Because it says that that's to be determined by the Maryland State Archives.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So in partnership with the Maryland State Archives, they have agreed to draft a brief paragraph, probably a few sentences about these women and the work that they did. So that way people viewing the art can understand the cultural, local, and historic significance that was. I know we're still trying to figure out exactly where that placard or whatever material it takes up in will be, but most likely it will be below the photograph, but I don't have a definitive answer for that as of right now.
Okay, so we just need that as a revision, and we need it as soon as possible because we'll also ask for the input from the Heritage Commission to weigh in on the accuracy, as well as even if Maryland State Archives is writing it. And
Okay.
I would say, again, we're saying this is quite feasible. I would only look at, if you can think about it, for the maximum visibility, since the sidewalk is actually lower than the patio of the State House Inn, you might make the photo even larger. There are companies in town that can enlarge without pixelating, and we can help you with those recommendations if you need them. So the commission can weigh into this, but I would say even larger would be fine. And that way the individual women won't get lost as a muddle.
Yeah, I don't know if Genevieve is still on, but I know she'll be excited to hear that as well.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all. Oh, and it's the same guidelines, B1, and then under D1, Secretary of the Interior Standards 1, 2, 5, and 9.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
And
other
thanks
commissioners?
for coordinating and communicating with us, just as Jeff Huntington has done. There's been great communication from both groups.
Yeah, this is my first time going through this process, so I've learned all the good work you guys do. So thank you. For that.
We're glad to help.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Bobby, you're first on my Brady Bunch. Thoughts?
Good for me. I agree. Let's make it bigger. Let's, you've got the room and can do it in a tasteful way, which it sounds like you can.
She said.
I'm not
the scale.
She likes it.
Yeah.
Will?
Definitely bigger.
Huh?
Definitely bigger.
Yeah, it doesn't have to look like a little billboard, actually.
Yeah, Roberta's point was good about not letting the individuals get lost, so that enlargement would be very good.
Yeah, I think it might look like a billboard at this scale. The larger, it looks like a whole wall covering, which is interesting thought.
Yeah.
Bill Williams?
I will go for the bigger. I mean, that building deserves a little bit of masking, and it is the season of masks.
The costs are going wild.
So,
all right. Okay.
Brian is raising his hand.
I was just gonna say, I didn't know if Dylan could put that image of the building back up again. But besides bigger, that corner of the building, the brick right there, I didn't know so that might be a good place for, I don't know, a brass plaque or something to just tell this story, what the image is. So
which corner?
The corner of the building, that right there.
Yeah.
Because when you're walking down the street, you might not, especially if their cafe is full, you don't want to get up to go try to read something. So that way people walking down the sidewalk.
Yeah, exactly. Or even on their little knee wall there, their brand new wall they just built there. If the State House Inn is willing to do that.
But I think bigger is better too. That wall's pretty ugly.
Yeah, nothing special about that wall. All right. Then I'll summarize the application for 14 State Circle. Appears to all the commissioners feel it's feasible, it's compliant with, particularly again, I like Secretary of the Interior number 9. It is not, it doesn't, the building is protected. It's also completely reversible if needed to be, and there are no features of the building that are the existing building that are going to be destroyed or hampered in any way, and that's guideline D3. So, Tammy, hopefully that is enough for you.
One more thing.
And that's all we have on our agenda. Thank you very much, everyone, for presenting tonight. And commissioners, thank you for participating. Any closing comments? That's actually, we don't have anything else on the agenda, but if anyone has anything to share.
Brian does.
Roberta, do you know when the Heritage Commission's next meeting is, or when we would need to get going before them?
I'm just going to go ahead and send it to them, and their next meeting is the first Wednesday in November, and you can present there if you like, but they can also review ahead of time, and I'll let you know if a presentation is needed, because basically they will discuss and submit the comments just like anyone else from the public would submit comments. And we don't know if by November those comments might be real, right? It sounds like folks by November can actually make comments on Zoom.
Yeah, and also
I'll be in touch about that.
Yeah, and we have also had approvals that are conditional with the approval. We can go through the process of approving something with the condition that the Heritage Commission reviews the wording. It's the wording that's important.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Brian.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Hang on to that one thing when it's just us, once it's just the commission. One more. I'm waiting for it to be just us. Aha. I may be alone in these comments, but I feel like I need to say something, maybe so that Roberta can talk me off the ledge. But I went to go take one last look at 99 Compromise. My husband drove the car down and we turned left onto Compromise, and I came around the corner onto Main Street and just about had a stroke. I mean, I know we've got outdoor cafes. I know what we're trying to do to help businesses get through the challenges of COVID and everything, but it just seems like it's completely out of control on Main Street in terms, I mean, there are signs that look like they belong in a carnival. There's no self-control going on there at all. And like I said, Roberta, can you talk me off the ledge? I mean,
you don't need to.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
So one of the big contributing factors visually are the orange and white Jersey barriers. And they're unfortunate, but they were insisted upon by Public Works as a safety measure. So if you compare some of, now I'm just giving context here.
I appreciate it.
Right, if you go to West Annapolis, there are some really nice diminutive outdoor seating areas that are in the street. They're built on platforms and they have fencing that surrounds them. They seem a lot more welcoming. No question that visually it's 100 times better. I also want to say you're not the first person to mention this. I've had someone within planning and zoning wag her finger at me. But
I won't
honestly,
wag my finger at you.
honestly, this
I concur. I've gotten several comments directed towards me as well. I'm sure Roberta has too.
it is one of the pieces of the recovery zone. If and then there's another piece, and that is that we have no control over the furniture, and the furniture is generally, it seems like they picked it up at it was picked up at Kmart, and there's no coordination of color or design. It's visually it's really awful. But Roberta, can I speak about our meeting with Eric Evans? You there?
Yes, but I just want to say something before then. So the conundrum is that this falls under the emergency order. And so there is no review by the Historic Preservation Commission. And the problem to many of the business owners is that they know they would have to remove all of this within 30 days if the emergency order is lifted. And they don't want to spend their own money on anything lovely and unified unless it is going to be more permanent. Well, more permanent, requires public hearing. And please know that the look is going to change again, and whether it's going to get worse or better, we're not sure, but we're trying to have a role in it. That cold weather is coming, and the need is there to give people the ability to continue to dine outside. The mayor is committed to having people, and so is the governor and the county executive, keep people outside as much as possible as opposed to inside. And so the look has to change yet again, because that requires heaters and protection for those heaters. And yet you don't want it to look like an enclosed space with plastic all around. So there's been discussion of, where is grant funding? Where is money from the governor that can unify it? Because again, the business owners are reluctant to spend a lot of money on something that may have to go away in 30 days. Go ahead, John, and talk about what Eric wants.
Well, I don't want to get off the subject, but I did talk. We had a meeting with Eric Evans, and there is at least a consideration for turning the area by market space into a permanent outdoor dining area. And amongst the many things I said, because that's a big change for that space. But amongst the many things that was said in that meeting for Roberta and me is, where's the design? This isn't just going to be the same. Oh, we're going to put some chairs out here and some recycled #1 plastic bottles as picnic tables and uncoordinated aesthetics. So it's
How does he react when you said that to Eric? Are they taking any leadership from their point of view to have a design, a palette, or
well,
first of all, outdoor dining, we have guidelines for dining for chairs and tables.
Right.
Are they talking about complying with those? What was Eric's reaction?
I think that Eric is thinking in terms of getting as much business for these businesses as possible. So there wasn't any emphasis on aesthetics. And the problem with it is that we may be living with this for another year. But there's money involved in purchasing the different fixtures that they would use. Here's the downside that I don't really understand, and maybe Bobby, this is part of what you're thinking. How is it possible that someone who is trying to make money by attracting people to dine at their restaurant has taken no time to think about how they could make it look better in order to get more people to come? I mean, Buddy's Crabs and Ribs is
national flags on the flagpole, and then they've got the signs for the plein air painting, and then they've got the electronic signboard that all it says is wear a mask, be nice, and it's 15 feet by 15 feet at the, you know, right in front of the junk. I can't imagine what a visitor to the city thinks when they see this, you know, carnival atmosphere on Main Street. I want all the businesses to succeed. I want them to have the outdoor dining if they need it, as long as they possibly can. I want them to be successful. I want us to make Main Street attractive.
And there's basically no end in sight. And we're going to move into the winter time. So, you know, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because I am meeting with the mayor on Monday, a virtual meeting with him on this topic, because Roberta highlighted to me the idea that the mayor is looking for some funding, possibly, for some funding to make something consistent, but that opens up all sorts of questions. First of all, I don't want us to be the only, I don't want the HPC to be the only participant in this discussion. I have to believe that code enforcement and fire safety, I mean,
well,
all of the design.
They would be there, but they have to have something to look at. And,
exactly.
And there aren't even any plans, really. It's just, this is much more shoot from the hip. I'm just saying that's how they function.
That's under a quote unquote emergency. Well, I think we're past that. Now it's becoming normal. The emergency order may not be lifted, but they're now going to the next stage of requests. And I think we need to understand the design, as you said. So I would really like it if each of you just spend a few minutes giving me some questions to ask Gavin. And at this point, it's only me and Gavin talking. But I truly appreciate your concerns. And there's a bit of a history with Public Works that they will go to the extreme of compliance with something like these Jersey barriers on Main Street. So it's a little confusing why on Main Street we have these unsightly barriers and over in West Annapolis we don't. So
West Annapolis, we don't have the traffic flow that they have.
Yeah,
on.
it's traffic.
Yeah.
And if I can jump in, Tim, I think you're right in questioning the way that Public Works addresses these issues. My long experience with them would support what you just said. They tend to want to take the most extreme position. And I wonder why the police and fire departments don't have first authority in this safety issue.
Public safety should come first.
And Public Works would only do what they direct.
Exactly.
Done. Now, some of the things I gave my last walking tour of the architecture Sunday last for this season, and I agree, it's a terrible visual clutter. But I have great sympathy for the businesses in the idea and the idea that this is temporary, no matter that temporary might be 6 months or 12 months or 18 months or even 24 months. And so I don't think that I want to be the one who's saying to the business owners, you have to buy this, you have to do that, and invest money when it's just going to perhaps go into the trash. Or worse, they say, well, you made us invest all this money, now we want to do this forever.
I think the forever thing is coming anyway.
Well, it is, but we don't want to give them any more ammunition.
Right.
To
That's right.
public opinion that they're valid in asking for that. So.
Well, that was another reason why I haven't stressed design guidelines or anything like
Yes.
that, because otherwise it does become permanent.
So what I would recommend is to follow John and Roberta's lead, which I think has been very sensible. And if they have seats at the table, and Tim, if you can keep your seat at the table,
Right.
then we need to represent these thoughts more or less as Bobby's presented them. It's a jumble.
It's a
Overkill. It can be done better even on a temporary basis. But God forbid that we give them more ammunition to say, I want to close down Main Street. I want to close down the whole market space. And then know that someday, hopefully, we're going to have an action plan that'll be put into place and all of this will become moot.
Right.
We're talking
It's
about.
completely dovetails into the whole city dock action plan, which is still kind of uncertain. I'm specifically going to ask, I don't know what's going on with the garage. I don't know any of you, whether they've granted, it's been 3 months since they went into discussions with an individual.
Yeah, those are being finalized now.
But we don't know which, I don't know which of the consortiums it is.
They awarded a
That has not been named yet.
Yeah, that's I'm going to ask him, who is it, for crying out loud? It's been 3 months. So
It's not formalized yet.
Well, Jeff brought it up and Brian more or less assented that there'll be construction in some near time.
yeah, there's certainly the Hillman garage is going to be reconstructed starting in a year or two.
Yeah.
And but the whole
I think they're very close to the legal documents that are being worked out.
That was the schedule they announced, yes.
Yeah. So please elaborate, if you will. Send me some emails and I'll create a little some talking points that I'll share with you when I talk to Gavin at 1:30 on Monday. And I'll get right back to you. He accepted my meeting right away as quickly as he could.
Okay. Thank you for indulging my hissy fit.
No, I'm really glad you talked. We should be able to talk about this kind of thing.
Yeah, it is a terrible visual clutter. And I wish if we could only get rid of those barriers, like Tim was saying, and do what's being done in West Annapolis.
Yeah.
That'd be a big improvement right there.
I
Look
get
around
rid
at
of
other cities. They're all going
flexibility.
through the same thing. Yeah, Philadelphia has got great examples on the street.
Yeah.
They have some advantages. Their streets are a little wider and they're in a grid. We are really cursed by not having a grid downtown.
Oh, heresy, Tim.
I agree. My
There's
goodness.
only one way in and one way out of downtown Annapolis. It's really a problem.
What is the ghost of Governor Nicholson saying right now?
I know. Our Baroque plan was designed for horse carriages and pedestrians.
All right.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
All right.
Good
We
night.
adjourn.
Do we need to adjourn formally, Tim?
Sure.
I made a motion.
Oh, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Good night, everyone. Thanks
Good
very
night,
much.
everybody.